Now we will turn the time over to Kenny. Kenny, please.
Thank you, Fiona, and thank you so much, everybody. Welcome to the session, and I'm very proud to be here to bring you through this session about really identity and access management, around how access and governing access is becoming so important today, especially in the light of digital transformation, but also what we are going through today in this entire pandemic that's impacting all of us. To us at Frost & Sullivan, we see that identity and access management is something that is becoming more and more a business imperative today. So in my session, as I start, I hope that to give you some information about this area, about some of the key benefits that we see coming out from this solution for your enterprise, and how there are multifaceted benefits on how it can help you. This session will be run and a lot of the information that you'll be getting would be from Frost & Sullivan's market research around identity and access control. But we wanted to also make it very real for you. As a respondent and as an attendee from the Asia Pacific region, we wanted to make sure that you got some information that's very specific to where you are as well. So today we'll be also sharing with you information that's directly from some of your markets. So we have data that we've just gotten from a survey in April, just last month, for Hong Kong and for Australia. We have respondents from Hong Kong, who 76% of the respondents are senior IT management, and more than 50% of Australian respondents are from IT senior management. And we have 4 different key industries: BFS, IT and technology, retail consumer, and logistics and transportation. Now, we understand that this is a regional webinar and a regional session today. So we know that we have colleagues from all over the region. We want to give you a guide on how to really look at the data if you are not from Hong Kong and Australia. Typically, if you're from Singapore, you can look at the Hong Kong numbers because Hong Kong and Singapore are very similar in terms of cybersecurity and technology markets. If you're from other countries, for example, maybe Malaysia or Indonesia or Thailand, then it will look at Hong Kong, but you just lower the number slightly. So that's typically how you look at the numbers. So we wanted to share this information with you so that it gives you a guide onto what the region is thinking about, what your compatriots are thinking about in the IT industry as well. Okay. Today we'll be covering 3 main points. Number 1, how has status quo changed? We all know that our life has changed today, and how has that impacted enterprises, especially in the IT teams? What are the new priorities that enterprises have to really think about and go through? Number 2, we want to talk about the key challenges that IT teams are facing today. We know that there are so many different things that are coming in. We have cloud environments, we have legacy apps, we have cybersecurity, and all that is coming together to make life even more complex for your IT team. So what are the key challenges? How can we overcome them? And number 3, what is identity and access management? How can it help my organization? How can it help my team become better, more efficient, and more cybersecure? But let's start off firstly with the first, our first thought, really around COVID-19. I think this picture really summarizes what we are all going through in many of our regions and our own countries. The country in many places have been locked down. We see economic activity slowing down. We see demand in certain areas going up, but we see demand in other areas going down. So we wanted to, firstly, as we start this session, also hear from you. So, right now we want to do a very quick poll question. And this poll question will appear on screen and Fiona will be helping us to release it to you. It really is very simple. We wanted to understand what is COVID-19's impact on you. Well, how have you been impacted by this? How is your organization being impacted from a business perspective? Now, we want this to be interactive. We want to hear from you, and the information that you share with us really is confidential, and this is only used for this visualization today. It will not be used in any other method. Okay, so we will just hold on this survey for maybe until 45 seconds, and then we will release the information to the crowd so that we can see what is the state of just all of us in this call alone, and how is COVID really impacting us. Another 3 more seconds. Okay, fantastic. So we'll end the poll and then we will show you the results right now. Yeah. Okay, fantastic. So you should see on screen the results. And the question was very simple. What best describes the impact of COVID-19 on your business activities in your enterprise? And we have a different range. We have pandemic has greatly reduced demand, all the way to pandemic has greatly increased demand. And we see that the most popular response, unfortunately, 34%, has seen that the demand for our solutions and services has dropped more than 10%, 34%. And we see that the demand, slightly from 1 to 9% is 13%. So we hear you. We hear you that almost half of us are really suffering negatively from this COVID pandemic. Thank you so much for your sharing and your contribution to this. So as we go on to that, the results, we wanted to hear from you, and we wanted to hear also from what the Hong Kong and Australian respondents are going through. And it's very similar to what you guys have mentioned. 59% of Hong Kong enterprises are negatively impacted by the COVID pandemic, 53% of Australian enterprises. So what does that really mean? Our demand for our business has shrunk. Demand has been negatively impacted for most of our organizations. And you see that, just looking back, our priorities have had to change as well. If you just look back 3-6 months ago, as we started this new year, all of us had many hopes and aspirations. We had many travel plans. We had many different parties and birthday celebrations to go to. And that has really changed now. Our lives have been impacted very greatly. Now, for IT teams, most of us, if we look 3 to 6 months back, we're really thinking about how to continue on with our digital transformation journey. Frost & Sullivan defines digital transformation in these 3 aspects on screen. You see the business functions combined with digital systems. So digital systems helping to really change the way certain business functions are done, and adding in the business models, new business models to create value for your organization. The value could be a better efficiency, but the value could also be in new ways of doing business, new ways of selling, and new ways to earn more revenue. Now, digital transformations is something we see so prevalent throughout the entire Asia-Pacific space. When we're looking back again to the Hong Kong and Australian respondents, we see that almost 90% of Hong Kong enterprises were going through digital transformation projects. 92% of Australian enterprises were going on digital transformation projects. Now, it really shows that all these organizations, digital transformation is something real and something that everyone is trying to embark on and trying to progress on. But now we see that the priorities have changed. We see that there's a big shift towards operations. We see that organizations like you and I have had to work from home in almost a very dramatic manner, from maybe 10% of our staff to almost 100% of our staff, and practically overnight. So what this has caused is, as you see in this article headline, this remote rush has caused a huge increase in the threat surface in our organization. We've had to, suddenly have our staff working from home. Maybe they're using their own equipment. Maybe they don't have enough VPN licenses. Maybe they don't have enough licenses for certain security functions, or the way that they access data has not been firmed up before this entire situation. So this really has caused organizations to shift their focus from digital transformation and towards operational issues, making sure that my organization is really secure as we go to remote. Why is this so important? It's because even as our priorities have shifted, cyber criminals' priorities have not shifted. Cyber criminals are very consistent. They are an organized business, and for them, their motivation has not changed. Their motivation continues to be profit. Cyber criminals have a global partnership network. Different teams will do different things. They are very, very well organized with different teams, focused on different aspects of cybercrime, and even a very established global marketplace with very interesting even business models in the way that they do cybercrime. Now, Cyber criminals are causing a big impact on our organization, even as we've had to adapt as IT professionals to this new reality of this COVID environment. So this is the very first point that we wanted to bring across. The status quo has changed. For all of us in IT and in our enterprises, we have to adapt accordingly as well. Now, before I go into the next topic, to touch on digital transformation, it does not mean that digital transformation is now not important. In fact, for many of us, digital transformation has become even more important because we have to find new ways to interact with our clients, even as we can no longer meet our clients in person. So digital transformation, new ways of engaging clients will also be a very, very important part as we go into this new normal. So as we go on to the next set, our second point, what are the biggest challenges and the biggest issues that CIO teams are facing? Now, we go back to the data. We asked about the COVID-19 pandemic, and we asked what is the IT team's main strategy during this period. You see that IT teams are very, very similar. The top two are the same for both countries. In Australia, the top priority is around maintaining business operations for the remote workforce. For Hong Kong, the top priority is around cybersecurity to make sure that my organization is better protected. But both is very clear. And I believe this is also the case for the whole of Asia Pacific, that operations is a priority, cybersecurity is a priority. Now, IT teams have to quickly adapt, but what about the previous projects that they were working on? We do know that many organizations were going to the cloud and going very strongly. So you have some data around this as well. To navigate you, on the left column, you see cloud and cloud adoption. On the middle column, we have the number of cloud service providers that these countries would be using. And on the right is around cloud and the perception of cloud security. Now we see that organizations in Hong Kong and Australia are moving strongly to the cloud. And you see this with this percentage, 65% of organizations and 63% of organizations, Hong Kong and Australia, have production projects that are using the cloud now. Now, when you look at it from a cloud service provider, we also know that multi-cloud is the reality. 60 to 70% of organizations have a multi-cloud strategy with at least 2 or more service providers for cloud. And when we look at it from a cloud protection point of view, unfortunately, there's still some misconception that exists around cloud and cloud security, because you see that 28% of Hong Kong respondents and 36% of Australian respondents still see that cloud service provider will protect their cloud to meet the necessary security requirements. I think for all of us on the call, it's very important to know that this is a misconception. It is very important for us, even as we go to the cloud, to continue to be aware of the shared responsibility model. You have to be responsible for the cloud, that even though you put it on a cloud service provider infrastructure. Okay, so cloud is growing. Enterprise organizations have to deal with a big change in their organization and remote workforce. They also have to understand that cloud is changing because of the COVID pandemic. Now we see how has the usage of cloud changed during this pandemic, and we see that a very, very large proportion of organizations, more than half, are actually saying that they have increased and adopted cloud more because of COVID. And it's very clear. The benefits of cloud are very apparent for all of us today. The ability to go online very quickly, ability to scale, the ability to pay on demand based on increase of demand or decrease in demand. So many, many benefits to cloud. It means that your organization IT team is getting more and more different things that they have to manage. They have to manage their cloud transformation. They have to immediately, and more than half of organizations, investigate how I can go on cloud more to enable increasingly remote and mobile workforce. So with all those in mind, what else does IT teams really have to go through? When we asked about what the top challenges are, we see that in Hong Kong, the top challenges are the lack of budget, resources and skills, technology adoption, wherein in Australia, there's lack of budgets, resources and skills, and data sovereignty in terms of public cloud infrastructure. So it's very clear. I think organizations really are, across Asia Pacific, we always hear this. I really need to fight for budget with my management. You know, the budgets are very scarce. They're the same, even though my requirements are growing up so much. We always hear of the lack of expertise. I get someone in my team, and the guy, we train him up, but he's poached by another organization. So I have trouble coping. So, you know, we want to, the reason for bringing all these challenges up is because the IT teams are under so much pressure today. They have the same number of resources or even less. They don't have enough, the resources and skills and expertise. They are having to take care of legacy equipment, legacy systems. They have to take care of digital transformation, cloud journey, newly remote workforce. Now, all of that is really causing the organizations to be more and more at risk. And you see that these poor IT teams have to deal with these different threats, these multiple vendors, multiple solutions, and organizations are continuing to be more and more at risk. We asked a very simple question: has your organization experienced a cybersecurity incident in the last 12 months? And we see that only 50%, 56% in Hong Kong and around 50% in Australia have not experienced a cybersecurity incident, but they have done forensics and assessments to check. So around half of organizations in Hong Kong, Australia have not checked, they have gotten a breach, or they have absolutely no idea. So Frost and Sullivan interprets this to say that organizations, we really have to be much more aware of the way our organization's posture is now. We feel that half of organizations in Asia Pacific in general continue to be at risk. So we want to bring across that there's so many different challenges, and there really needs to be a better way to manage all this. Now, to conclude the second point, cybersecurity needs to remain a priority. The threat landscape is becoming more challenging day by day. Enterprises are continually at risk. So the broad question is, how do I enable my enterprise IT team to better protect the organization? So that brings us to the third point. The third point that I want to cover today is around identity and access management and how it can help your organization. So this content is from Frost & Sullivan's market research, and I'll go through firstly around the definitions. Digital identity is a unique identifier assigned to users, and it can be used for different ways. It can be used for different access to different systems. And typically in today's environment, we have so many different identities. And even in our work environment, we use many different applications, sometimes not authorized by our organization. So so that's identity. Access is the granting of authorization, and identity access management are systems that securely facilitate user access to these solutions. And this, as I mentioned in an earlier section, has grown tremendously. There's so many new applications. There's so many cloud applications. So a very concise and integrated way of managing identity and access is very important. Now, why is this? What can identity access management really help, and what can it do for your organization? Well, most organizations would think of this in many different ways, but Frost & Sullivan sees that you have to think about this from 5 different areas, multifaceted ways of which identity access management can help you. Number 1, of course, is still cybersecurity. Now, cybersecurity is the most important because identity is always the key way that organizations try to enter your system. They would use different methods to try to steal credentials to actually access systems. So cybersecurity is very much the key driver for this, but the others are also very important. Number 2, cost containment. How do you make your IT team more productive? How do you reduce the effort required to manage the access and access changes as they really change over the time your organization grows? Number 3, operational efficiency. How do you make sure that your team is more efficient, they have a high degree of automation so that you don't have to spend too much time on this process? Number 3, regulatory compliance. How do we make sure that there are adequate reporting? How do I show that we have done correct steps to make sure that our access and identity is protected? And ultimately is number 5, to make sure that our organization protects its data and its IP, to make sure that our organization is cyber safe. Now, these are the 5 key drivers, and we see that we really recommend that you look at these 5 key drivers as you consider thinking about identity and access management. Now, when we asked organizations in Hong Kong and Australia, how do you handle identity and access management? We see that many organizations still use a manual process. So these 2 options are around manual processes. A manual process where the IT team will make changes is relatively messy, relatively ad hoc. With other organizations doing slightly better, still manual process, but it's relatively in control. We have some which are using a semi-automated process, and we have very few, frankly, only 13% in both countries that have a fully automated solution. Now, more than half of enterprises still struggle with manual process. So, we feel that there are better ways to manage this so that your team can be more efficient and more effective in cybersecurity. Now, we want to recommend 3 main considerations when you think about identity access management. And this is something that you can take away from this session so that you can really consider what you want to do. Number 1, how do you currently manage identity access? Is it currently a haphazard manual process? How do you potentially get better efficiencies in this area? That's number 1. Number 2, how do you enable your remote workforce? Now, the pandemic has meant that the remote workforce is now a reality for most of us. Cloud is now a reality for most of us. How do we make sure that we protect our organization from an identity perspective wherever they are, whatever system they're trying to get to? And number 3, of course, again, the most important, how do you make sure to prevent breaches? How do I make sure I prevent compromised or mismanaged practices? Because again, identity is one of the key areas that cyber criminals are targeting to get access to your organization. So to summarize this 3rd section, to us at Frost & Sullivan, we see that identity access is a business imperative. You need to protect your organization because access and identity is one of the most exploited areas in your organization's IT. And this solution can help you in multiple aspects, and we talked about 5 areas beyond just efficiency, beyond cybersecurity, reporting, and others as well. Now, as I come to the last slide of my session, this is our recommendation on how to really think about the information that we bring to you today. We really recommend this framework to think about any kind of information that you use that you receive for your own organization. 3 P's: prevent, prepare, and predict. Prevent. What do I do now that I have this information? How do I prioritize my organization and put it first with this to prevent something from happening? Number 2, how do we prepare? In this particular case, I put a very specific example. How do I identify what my existing capabilities are to meet the challenges required from the COVID pandemic? How do I make sure I prepare myself? And number 3, predict. How do I take this information and put it so that I can predict and prepare my organization in the long term so that I can better change the posture of my organization and get better prepared. So prevent, prepare, and predict. So just to summarize the 3 points again that we covered today. Number 1, digital transformation, as I mentioned, is still vitally important, but it's very clear that IT teams are changing their priorities because of the way the remote workforce has changed. Number 2, IT teams are facing more challenges today than ever before. They have to know so many legacy things that they have to take care of. They have to take care of new initiatives, digital transformation, so many vendors, so many solutions. How do we make sure that they get better tools? How do they get more efficient? And number 3, identity and access management. It can support an enterprise in multifaceted ways. And we've talked about 5 different areas just now. So how can you think about those different areas for your organization? Okay, so this concludes my session. And I would like to pass on to Gary. And Gary will be bringing us through a bit more detail about how SailPoint can really help you in your journey for digital transformation and your remote workforce today. Gary, over to you.
Great, thanks very much, Kenny. I'll just share my screen. Okay, fantastic. So just confirmation, you can see that, Kenny?
Yes, I can.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. So a lot of great points there. Just in terms of an introduction for myself, my name is Gary Severino. I am with SailPoint as an identity governance strategist for SaaS specifically for the APAC region. So as Kenny just went through, a lot of great points, especially with regards to the current landscape and the market today in the face of global challenges that we're all facing, which is inevitably sort of fast-track digital transformation for a lot of organizations today. So a lot of what we're going to be talking about is really in the face of digital transformation, the challenges facing organizations today. How can we address some of those challenges from an identity perspective? So first of all, I just wanted to start off with an introduction around SailPoint. For those of you who may not have heard who SailPoint is, identity is all we do. So we're specifically in the identity governance and administration space. And really we created the industry, and this is off the back of SOX compliance. So going back to around 2005, where there was a requirement for organizations to prove compliance. So really created the industry, and we pioneer innovations off the back of that. We've built our portfolio of solutions, not just from a compliance perspective or an access certification, but encompassing the full realm of what identity governance and administration is. And we'll explore some of that today. And we've got a proven customer success track record. So we invest a lot in ensuring that customers are successful with the solutions that they procure from SailPoint. A little bit more about our background. We were established again back in 2005. We're based in Austin, Texas as our headquarters, and we are a global organization. We are a recognized industry leader in identity governance, and I've got a slide that really reinforces that message. We're about 1,300 global customers in the identity governance and administration space, and that's organizations that have really lent on SailPoint to improve their processes around audit compliance, as well as the full capabilities around identity governance. And again, speaking about customer success, looking at a 95% customer retention rate, and that is that's a very big focus area for SailPoint. All of our customers have a dedicated customer success manager who are really there again to ensure that they get value out of their investment in SailPoint and their solution around identity governance and administration. In terms of industry leadership, Gartner, again, for the 6th consecutive year, in 2019's Magic Quadrant for Identity Governance Administration has pushed us even further to the top and right of the Magic Quadrant, really reinforcing our capabilities in terms of completeness of vision and ability to execute. And for the first time, what's interesting about this Magic Quadrant is that they took into consideration our broad portfolio, which includes our SaaS solutions. So that really does speak to our vision and our innovation in this space, and not to mention also Forrester Wave also being recognised in their analysis. So, but what do we do? We're in a complex world, complex landscape of identities, access, multiple types of identities. We've got application explosion in cloud, and not to mention data being able to reside anywhere, both on-premise and in cloud. And really the focus of what we do are these 3 key points. So it's all around who currently has access, who should have that access, and how is access being used. So ultimately visibility and governance underpinned by the foundational services of identity governance and administration. But when we talk about identity in itself is quite a broad term, and there's multiple disciplines in that space. And I'm talking a lot about identity governance and administration, and hopefully at the conclusion of this session, that'll all become a bit clearer. But in terms of what does that identity landscape look like? We talk about concepts like access management, which are your traditional SSO and MFA providers. Now, these are dedicated solutions specific to that space around access management. From there, we talk about privileged access management. Again, a very dedicated discipline in identity, all about controlling the use of privileged access in organizations. And identity governance and administration is its own standalone discipline in identity. And while we don't provide the SSO or MFA capabilities or the privileged access management capabilities, the overlap on those disciplines is really around the oversight and governance that we can provide into those systems as well, from providing visibility around who has access in from an SSO or MFA perspective, but also who has privileged access and the ability to apply the governance services across those, including things like provisioning access into those systems. And really the fourth one, and a bit over to the right, is around consumer identity and access management. And that really looks to address organizations that have voluminous user bases with minimal entitlements. So retail being a typical consumer of consumer identity and access management. One thing that is, common across all of these is that ultimately identity is power. And that's certainly, to the point around what we do around identity governance and administration. To really emphasize that, interestingly, the World Economic Forum's 2019 Global Risk Report named cyber attacks and data breaches as the 4th and 5th most serious risks facing the world today. And that's quite an amazing, statistic when we think about that. But really, they have revised the long-term risk outlook. There is a new report out for 2020, and the good news there is that those two technological related areas are no longer in that top 5. But unfortunately, they are still numbers 6 and 7. So still very significant in terms of ultimately the risk from a global perspective. Now, of course, this is behind things like extreme weather, climate action failure, and of course, what we are experiencing today from a global challenge and pandemic perspective. And of course, this has really, really changed the way things are today, both at a personal level, business level as well. And to Kenny's point earlier, in times of crisis, what we do find is that risk, increases, as these factors prolong in duration. And really, this is an opportunist area for these cyber criminals to really ramp up their efforts in trying to breach organizations and impact individuals as well. So very, very. I guess just again reinforcing the fact that the risk does increase under these circumstances, and a lot of that is really because we live in this highly complex but connected world. So it's like the perfect storm where we have this this global issue, global challenge in this complex and connected world, which means that these cyber criminals are actually able to really expand their efforts. And complexity is a big part of it. And when we think about our own organizations and we think about, internally and on premise, we've got this layered stack of complexity, be it, workloads on premise, networks, firewalls, all the factors that go, applications, databases, different operating systems. This is the complex on-premise landscape. And again, we with best efforts, we try and protect this at the perimeter with a firewall. But what we're doing is, we're embarking more and more, and specifically now with the statistics that Kenny presented around adoption of cloud and SaaS services. And that's natural. A lot of organizations are expediting digital transformation. In fact, there's some statistics around some organizations being able to achieve years of digital transformation in a matter of months. But what that means, again, that's added complexity. Even though we try and segregate those environments and apply controls, ultimately, we're overlaying all of that with identities and all different types of identities across all those different platforms and applications, as well as the access. So that, again, just reinforcing the complex nature of these environments. But one thing that is absolutely common is it does all come down to the identity. It's been said before that, the perimeter today is the identity. For the most part, I have been a remote employee well before, the global challenges that we're faced with today. And I can access everything I need to, from my MacBook, all applications, without even connecting a VPN. So really, it all comes down to what controls and security are we putting around the identity. And that's the critical part today. But the unfortunate reality is that in these challenging times, businesses are focused on just their business and business continuity. And that is, by nature, it's all about ensuring sustainability of your own organization. And organizations don't want to know about these long-term, painful strategic programs of work. And the perception is identity fits into that bucket. When we think about the complexity and trying to address that complexity and help drive digital transformation, sometimes it's perceived, to be that painful piece of work. And that's because when we think about identity, for those that have embarked on those journeys, identity sometimes is kind of synonymous with, terms like over budget and over time. While ultimately best intentions, it's there to provide security around the identity in this zero trust model. We're trying to always protect ourselves from potential breaches. Unfortunately, so there is some pain that sometimes comes along with that. And that again is because of traditional approaches to identity and the complexity around identity. In terms of workforce continuity in a time of crisis, there's some interesting information here that really suggests that, identity is a driver, not only for that workforce continuity, but of course, in digital transformation, underpinning digital transformation efforts. After all, it's about more identities and more access. But at this point in time, huge focus on organizations with business continuity. We've seen a workforce transformation with a lot of employees now, being remote employees, which again just means that they've had to have provisioned access to more and more systems with bigger adoption of cloud services. Again, big focus on workforce continuity. But again, coming back to the fact that identity is ultimately power. We've seen this identity explosion, especially recently with, higher adoption of cloud, the proliferation of cloud services, more identities, more access, but yet we're still having to meet the existing or even more stringent regulations, be it internal or external compliance. And all of this again is huge complexity. We're layering more and more complexity into our organizations, but yet, we want to achieve outcomes with rapid speed. And that in itself is part of the challenge. But this is 2020. And from a SailPoint perspective, it's really time to rethink identity. So identity, again, for a long time, we've had some traditional approaches, projects, again, over budget, over time. We try and do too much and not getting the value that one desires out of a solution like this in the time frame that we ideally would want. So rethinking identity really means a number of different things. But part of that is really rethinking traditional approaches to identity with a SaaS mindset first. It's rethinking the complexity. It's rethinking how we get to that outcome. And again, SaaS is a big part of that story. And ultimately at SailPoint, we're really all about trying to make identity simple, ultimately rethinking those traditional approaches and trying to find what is going to be the simplest way for us to implement the controls and the identity governance and administration needs that we need in a simple way. And, Steve Jobs actually says this quite well, but simple can actually be harder than complex. And it's not to say that, we've just made, identity simple and we don't give you the capabilities that you need in an identity governance solution. But what we've actually done is we've taken all the learnings over our years of being in identity governance and administration, and we've taken that complexity and we've simplified it into a SaaS-based platform. Leonardo da Vinci actually says simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. So we've taken care of all that complexity and made it just easier for our customers to implement identity governance and administration solution in a SaaS-based platform. And a lot of that is through innovation. And I like to use this analogy here. And this is the Model T Ford. And back in 1908, Henry Ford started producing the Model T through general production line assembly. Prior to that, all his automobiles were bespoke builds. And they were bespoke builds for the elite, for those that could afford an automobile at the time. And that's a lot what identity governance administration has been like. There's this perception that it's been reserved for the enterprise, only for those that could afford it. So we're thinking, large enterprise, banks, governments, they're the ones that can afford identity governance, but yet everyone still has the problem. So the approach that we've taken is we've made identity consumable by more organizations with a SaaS-based approach. Again, very similar to the Model T Ford through general production line assembly. It was the first time that automobiles, we're at a point where they were affordable and consumable by the general American public. And from a SaaS perspective, it's really about changing the conversation. When we talk about a multi-tenant microservice approach to identity governance administration, we're changing those perceptions of negativity, of over budget over time. But we talk about things like speed to value, quick wins, human-centered design, a platform of continuous delivery, very much focused again on the people experience. So again, this is years of learnings, years of experience and leadership in identity governance administration that SailPoint has implemented into a SaaS-based solution, really encouraging customers or our organizations to aim for those quick wins and get the value out of the solution through a configuration versus customization approach. Taking advantage of out-of-the-box functionality available in our SaaS service that is enterprise and enables all the functionality of a traditional identity governance solution just in an easier to consume method. And with that, Gartner predicts that by 2022, 40% of global organizations will use these capabilities delivered as SaaS. I kind of think of, I like to use the analogy of email. My background is predominantly from a Microsoft platform perspective. And if I think back 10, 15 years ago, part of my role was designing and architecting Microsoft Exchange deployments. And I don't come across many organizations today that architect, design, deploy Microsoft Exchange anymore for simply for email. It's now easier more than ever to consume email just as a service as we would from Microsoft as Office 365 or through Gmail. And really this is direction of identity. SaaS will never be a fit for all, and there's organizations that may still want to have identity services on premise, just as there's still some out there that consume email on premise through Exchange deployments. But the reality is identity is moving in the trajectory of being able to consume it as a service in the same way that we consume email today through the likes of 365 and Gmail. So I wanted to introduce you now to SailPoint, predictive identity, and what we're doing in this space. And this is really, rethinking identity again, beyond just what is traditional identity governance administration, but the innovations that we're making in this predictive identity space. And really, there's 4 core pillars of predictive identity. Underpinning all of that is really about staying in complete control in this ever-changing dynamic technological landscape that we're in. And part of that is being able to anticipate user access needs, being able to spot risky user behaviors, being able to adapt and automate security policies, and ultimately connect and control access to everything. Ultimately, the more connectivity, integration we have with our systems, the more control, visibility, and governance we can apply to it all. And really what we see on the screen here is the capabilities, or the module specifically, under the SailPoint Predictive Identity banner. So these are services that can be consumed as part of our SaaS service. Now, everyone can be on a different journey in identity governance and administration. And from a SaaS perspective, there's no requirement to have to consume the entire platform. But really look to address what it is you need to do today with a view that there's a platform there that can support the growing needs of the organization as it pertains to identity governance and administration, but also the predictive identity elements. So aiming for those quick wins. So we talk about provisioning, access requests, password management, certification, and separation of duties. And those I like to call the foundational 5. These are the foundational 5 elements of identity governance administration. We build on that with what we're doing around predictive identity with our access insights, access modeling, our recommendations, and cloud governance. And I'm just going to go through each of these in a bit more detail. From a provisioning perspective, we're talking about concepts that are quite, organizations want to be able to take advantage of these in a very easy way, but it's the day one onboarding, not having to input new user details in multiple different repositories from HR to directories to applications, but be able to add them into a HR platform and then apply automated policy-based provisioning to onboard a user specific to their job title or their role. And from there, being able to automate all of those actions, incorporating the mover and lever as well. If someone changes roles in an organization, updating the access, removing the old, ensuring that they've got the right level of access to do their job. And naturally there also the lever process, which is something that a lot of organizations are still challenged with, implementing an efficient deprovisioning policy or offboarding procedure. I've worked for an organization where I still had access to email, for example, 4 weeks after I left that organization. And that is a risk that a lot of organizations are still in today. But ultimately, what organizations can do is take advantage of these operational efficiencies. We're talking about increases in productivity because people have the right levels of access. New starters can sit down and start doing their job day one. We're negating the error-prone manual approaches where people are over-provisioned with too much access. We want to ensure that users have the right access for their role at the right time by adopting this least rights approach. So ultimately, reinforcing security within organizations, ensuring that people have just the right level of access to perform their job. And moving on from there, we talk about access request. Now, one of the areas that a lot of organizations tend to focus a lot on as part of these identity governance administration programs of works is looking at, I want to define a very specific and very accurate role based access model. So, that role composition needs to be accurate day one, 100% accurate. Now, there's a lot of time that gets spent. A lot of time organizations don't have the capability to understand the exact composition of what a person's job role and their access should be. So when we talk about quick wins, we take provisioning, we take what we understand roles to be, we implement what should be the minimum set of access for that particular role, and then we just publish the rest. We make it available in a self-service, intuitive request center to empower the workforce. If I start a job day one and I don't have all the access I need, I can go to the request center and I can request additional access, not having to go to the help desk to request that additional access, ultimately streamlining that entire process, completely underpinned by approval. So again, we're talking about increased productivity of the workforce, complete oversight, again, with approval and an audit trail along with that as well. And thinking about the current landscape today, again, we've totally transformed the workforce, and we've found, organizations have had to ramp up access to different applications. And for the most part, that's been a manual effort, and the help desk has been providing that assistance to undertake that activity. But, when we think about how could that have been automated, what could we have done better? We have users that are working remotely, being able to just go to a self-service request portal and just requesting that additional access, and then managers or application owners or data owners or platform owners can just approve that access. So completely streamlining that. And, I know we're talking a lot about, the global challenges today, but, what this pandemic has definitely, highlighted for us globally is that, we still need to change the way we work. This is not a temporary measure. This will be, something new that organizations will have to contend with. It's this new working environment where we've learned a lot, and we will continue like this. This is just a new way forward in terms of how we operate within organizations. And from there, again, we think about the challenges we're going through now. Just the ability to have self-service password reset. That's an out-of-the-box capability. We provide a very simple and intuitive interface for that process, which is available on any device, anywhere, anytime. So whether it be a laptop, workstation, tablet, mobile device, we've got mobile apps available as well for users to reset their password. And what we're doing is we're increasing security as well by eliminating the need for someone to reset a password manually and then having to share that password. We're ensuring that the password is only ever known to the individual whose account it is. But it's more than just self-service password reset. We also extend on that for automated password synchronization. There's recognition that organizations aren't just bound to one account and one password. There's still a number of on-premise systems that maintain different passwords and different password complexity. And where that's the case and password complexity is different, we can allow organizations to have a single consistent approach to resetting passwords for different applications. But where password complexity aligns, we can synchronize the password, so reducing the password burden with same sign-on. From there, we talk about access certification, and depending on organizational needs, some do it from a best practice perspective, but this is the element of visibility as well, and empowering individuals in the organization to make decisions around who should have access to what. So whether it's just internal best practice or externally applied audit regulation or compliance requirements, the access certification component of our platform just allows organizations to streamline and simplify completely the certification needs of those organizations, just making it easier to meet those audit and compliance needs. And a big part of that, again, as mentioned, is empowering more decision makers in organizations. So not just relying on managers to make decisions about applications that they really don't know about, but enabling those application owners, resource owners, system owners to make decisions around whether individuals should have access. Ultimately, what we're doing is reducing that certification burden on organizations as well by enabling a function of micro certification. So through our dynamic discovery engine, which is unique to the platform, which is an elastic search-based search engine, we can really refine what it is we want to certify and create these micro certifications to ensure that we're not burdening individuals with long, comprehensive certification campaigns. And one of the key things is we automate decision fulfillment. So whether access is approved or revoked, in the event that it is revoked, we can ensure that there is complete closed loop fulfillment on that, removing access as per the decisions made in those certification campaigns. From a separation of duties perspective, it's all about being able to easily detect access violation, ultimately strengthening security, and empowering the right users in organizations to be the violation owners. So ultimately making Detective SOD simple in the platform with simple policy-based configurations, again, leveraging what we're doing with our dynamic discovery search engine and being able to really create an SOD policy that is refined and reflects the needs of organizations. As we start to move into what we're doing around our access insights, access modeling, and the recommendations engine, this is beyond what we're doing around traditional identity governance administration. So beyond the foundational 5, but this is now starting to go, to the next frontier. We're ushering in the new era of identity here with AI, artificial intelligence, and machine learning driven approaches. So we're empowering businesses with increased efficiencies, allowing organizations to govern access with a new level of intelligence, adapting security with organizational change, and being able to achieve continuous compliance. And, really what we're doing as part of this is, really the brains behind this is being able to collect all the identity information that we have in our platform from an accounts and entitlements, and we're processing it with AI and ML. And we're creating what we call these peer groups. So we're undertaking peer group analysis, which is really analysis of these groups and putting people together that have shared entitlement or access DNA. So we're grouping these up into these peer groups, which underpin what we're doing from an access modeling, which is, I guess what we call a role mining to surface up potential roles in an organization. But from a recommendations perspective, we're now able to say, to apply thumbs up and thumbs down as part of certification campaigns, just making it easier for decisions to be made. Ultimately, with the view where you can start to auto approve, a thumbs up in a certification based on a high degree of confidence that access is required by that individual, right through to being able to surface up additional access for individuals based on like set of access in their peer group. And from an access insights perspective, it's being able to interface with the identity data in a very different way through visual dashboards and being able to really slice and dice and orchestrate the data within dashboards that is really specific to organizational needs. And lastly, from a cloud governance perspective, cloud really changes what we do from a governance perspective. If we think about traditional identity governance and administration, or traditional identity governance, if we distill it down to its simplest form, we talk about accounts and entitlements, and those accounts and entitlements really enable the access to the application landscape or to the systems. From a cloud perspective, when we talk about things like AWS, GCP, or Azure, there is added complexities. There's many different types of identities, root accounts, groups, we've got roles. And fundamental to cloud is this notion of policies. And policies are code-based, and they can dynamically assign access at any point in time. It's not that you can have a quick view typically on what an account is entitled to based on policies. What we need to actually do is, and what we do in our platform is, we calculate this resultant access. We analyze all possible access methods or entitlement methods, whether it's through policies or roles defined on groups or identities or static policies or dynamic policy. We analyze all of that to determine the resultant access, and that is where the complexity lies within cloud governance. Ultimately as well, we're increasing security with real-time threat detection. So we have the concept of guardrails within our platform. So think of those as security controls or rules that really define how things should be done in cloud. And if anyone ever tries to, circumvent that control, we can raise an alert and determine if there's a threat. And one of the big things that it does do is it bridges the gap between, DevOps and security. And that's, when we think about DevOps, they're all about speed, automation, and security doesn't really come into that, but yet security lacks the visibility in cloud and in what DevOps is doing. So through our solution, we're bringing that all together in a single view of who has access to what into those cloud environments. So that really is just a high-level summary of what we're doing around predictive identity, but again, incorporating our foundational 5 services with the extension of what we're doing with AI and ML and cloud governance to really change what's happening in identity governance administration through what we're talking around predictive identity. And important to note as well that, as part of our innovations, we're constantly developing new patents, and we've just actually been awarded 4 new patents for the work that we're doing around predictive identity. Just a few advantages from a SaaS platform perspective. It means continuous delivery. Organizations or our customers don't ever need to upgrade a platform. We're always updating the platform. All of our customers globally are always on the latest version. We apply configuration versus customization. Ultimately, the aim here is to dispel those negative connotations that organizations may have embarked on in the past with identity journeys, but moving to configuration, getting quick wins out of the out of the solution without the need for those traditional deep expertise in identity. The multi-tenant microservice architecture provides a scale and quality that organizations need. There's no limit to what we can do or the load that we can put onto the platform given the architecture. And lastly, it's active monitoring and management. We manage the platform and monitor the platform. It is really just a service that is consumed by our customers to deliver enterprise-grade identity governance and administration. And lastly, identity is our business, and we really don't want organizations, if you're not in the business of identity, to make it yours. So, in understanding organizations are focused on, business continuity. There's still an opportunity here, especially with all the change, digital transformation, workforce continuity, to start taking advantage of some of the efficiencies and additional security that identity governance can provide, without making identity a big practice within your own organizations. So thank you. That does actually sum up my presentation as well today.
Thanks, Gary, and thanks, Kenny, as well. So we will now go ahead and take some time for questions. Just a reminder, be sure to type your questions into the question box, Q&A box in your Zoom control panel. Otherwise, you may also raise your hand and I will enable your mic.
So Gary, since we're still waiting for a question from the crowd, maybe I wanted to ask you first. When clients come to you at SailPoint, what are the biggest, 1 or 2 issues that they're trying to solve? What's the key thing that they're trying to look to you guys to help them?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess, look, this does depend on, industries and type of business. But look, a lot of the time it really does come down. Security is always a big part of it. Visibility is a big part. Really, fundamentally, organizations come to us because they just don't know who has access to what. And the current climate and in the face of, ongoing security breaches in organizations, it is an imperative to understand the access of individuals. Visibility, again, is a big part of what we do in the platform. We can call things like provisioning access requests as peripheral services. That all goes hand in hand, but ultimately what we do is, we always provide that visibility, of who has access to what resources, so organizations can get on top of security, increase security specific to the identity in organizations.
Great, thank you.
Okay, I've received one question from Mark Lynch to all panelists asking whether for identities, this can apply to customers, contractors, internal and external.
Yeah, absolutely. So, from an identity perspective, our solutions cater all identity types. Organizations, are having to deal with, the explosion of identity. So whether it's internal full-time employees, contingent workers, contractors, third parties, visitors, B2B, bots, IoT, they're all identities with access and they all need to be governed. So definitely catered to within our platform.
Right. Are there any additional tools, softwares, and licenses needed to implement the SailPoint solution?
That's a very broad question. I would probably encourage you, whoever it was that answered that question, just to reach out to the team. There's an email address on screen here. As a SaaS service, obviously there's licensing implications. Typically bound to identities, but there's different licensing metrics. So probably getting into that conversation could take a bit longer than the few minutes we might have left remaining on this webinar. In terms of componentry perspective, we have a unique architecture around the SaaS platform. Security is a very big part of it. While it is a SaaS service, what we do in order to utilize our zero knowledge patented encryption model, we use something called a virtual appliance that really brokers the connectivity between all applications, be it on-premise or in cloud, into the SaaS platform.
Another question from KX Lim. What's SailPoint USP? How do you differentiate from your competitor?
That's a great question. Look, when it comes to differentiation is always is an interesting question. We've been in this industry for a number of years. So since 2005, as I mentioned, pioneered identity governance. Really, we're recognised as the out in front leader in this space. Fundamentally, when it comes to our SaaS platform, we are the only organisation globally that offers a service in this way as a true multi-tenant microservice SaaS solution. So when you look at the landscape, just in general, I guess around how solutions are delivered, they're either delivered as an on-premise solution, they're delivered as a hosted cloud or single tenant solution, or as a true multi-tenant microservice SaaS solution. And that's really where we stand out with our SaaS service. Again, being the only organization globally that offers, a fully featured identity governance and administration landscape with the extended predictive identity capabilities as a SaaS service.
Okay, it looks like we have covered all the questions we have for now. Just before we wrap up, is there anything else you want to cover and share with the attendees? Gary?
For myself, look, I thank you, Kenny, again for your session. Some great insights there, and I think it really does just reinforce, I think, what we're all experiencing today. Especially with regards to increases in cloud adoption, concerns around security, naturally the transforming workforce. It's nice to get some external validation, of the current landscape. I guess we're all thinking it, but it's nice to know that this is actually consistent with what we're seeing, pretty much at a global level. But again, just reinforces the fact that, security still is a big part of, what organizations need to do.
Okay, I've got one more question. Asking if you can describe an example or use case of how AI is utilized.
Yeah, absolutely. So within our access insights, access modeling, and the governance recommender. So again, the AI implementation there, it's using some various different methods, the Louvain method and another that's just not coming to mind right now. But it's all based on being able to apply the AI to group people, with similarities. So applying that method to group them up using, again, what we call access or entitlement DNA, similar access and entitlements DNA, and we're putting them into these peer groups. And the other element of that is we can also determine outliers. So who are individuals that have access like a few others or a peer group, but also have this level of access that may be completely outside of that peer group. So that's an element of that. But what we're doing really, AI ML is ultimately what goes into our peer group analysis, but how we're applying that is what we're doing to help organizations really increase their efficiencies and simplify processes around things like access certification. You know, for organizations that, you know, have embarked on that journey, who have to perform access certifications, will understand that there's this concept of certification fatigue, because there's just so much to certify. So by applying, what we're doing with AI and ML, and with the thumbs up, thumbs down recommendation, we're able to reduce the noise. If there's things that don't need to be surfaced to overwhelm these access reviewers, we can just draw attention to the things that are important, like the outliers, the low risk the low percentage thumbs down categories that we need to pay extra attention to. We can surface things like what is brand new access, what is privileged access, as opposed to, again, the high percentage of, most people have it in your peer group, so it's safe. So that's an application of what we're doing around AI and ML.
Thanks, Gary. And Kenny, is there anything else you want to cover before we wrap up?
Sure. So I just wanted to thank the team again and thank all the participants. Want to just summarize again the 5 key outcomes of identity and access. I think number 1 is around cybersecurity. Number 2 is cost containment. Number 3, operational efficiency. Number 4 is regulatory compliance. And number 5 is data protection. So when you're considering a solution around this area, think about these 5 areas. So that's my recommendation.
Thanks, Kenny, for your insightful sharing. It's a pleasure being with you and everyone today. If you have any questions and inquiries, please do not hesitate to send us an email to apac_sales@sailpoint.com. Thanks again for joining us, and we will see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.